The morning of my 18th birthday started like any other Tuesday in our cramped two-bedroom apartment in Cleveland. The radiator clanked its familiar rhythm against the October chill, and Mom was already dressed for her shift at the diner, her uniform wrinkled from being stuffed in a laundry basket for 3 days. She stood by the kitchen counter, smoking her third cigarette of the day while staring out the window at the parking lot below. "Happy birthday," she said without turning around, her voice flat as yesterday's coffee. I was pouring cereal into a chipped bowl when she dropped the bomb that would reshape my entire world. "You're 18 now. Time to go." The Cheerios scattered across the linoleum floor as the bowl slipped from my hands. "What do you mean?" She finally turned to face me, her hazel eyes, the same ones I'd inherited, cold and distant. "I mean, you're an adult. I did my job. 18 years, just like the law says. Now it's time for you to figure out your own life." The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in on me. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door yelling at her kids to get ready for school. The same routine that had marked my mornings for the past 4 years we'd lived here. Everything felt normal except for the words hanging in the air between us. "Mom, I'm still in high school. I graduate in May." She took a long drag from her cigarette, the smoke curling toward the water-stained ceiling. "Should have thought about that before you decided to give me attitude for the past 2 years. I'm done, Marcus. Done with the arguments. Done with feeling like a failure every time I look at you." My stomach dropped. Sure, we'd fought. What teenager doesn't fight with their parent? But I never imagined it would come to this. I thought about all the times she complained about her own mother kicking her out at 17, how she'd sworn she'd never do the same to her kid. "Where am I supposed to go?" She shrugged, stubbing out her cigarette in an ashtray already overflowing with butts. "That's not my problem anymore. Your dad never stuck around to help raise you, so don't expect me to keep doing it alone forever." The mention of my father stung. He'd left when I was 6, and every argument since then somehow circled back to how I reminded her of him. Same stubborn streak, same dark hair, same way of questioning everything. "You have until I get home from work," she said, grabbing her purse and keys. "Pack what you can carry." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the sudden silence. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm went off in the distance. I stood there in my pajamas, surrounded by scattered cereal, trying to process that my childhood had just ended with all the ceremony of taking out the trash. I looked around the apartment that had never quite felt like home, but was the only home I'd known. The couch with the broken spring, the TV we'd bought at a pawn shop, the kitchen table where I'd done homework while she worked double shifts. In 8 hours, none of it would be mine anymore. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone to call my best friend Jake. His mom answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Peterson? It's Marcus. Is Jake there?" "Oh, honey, he's already at school. Is everything okay? You sound upset." I stared at the mess on the floor, at the life I was about to leave behind, and tried to find words that would make sense of something that didn't make sense at all. "I think I need help." Jake's mom, Linda Peterson, picked me up 3 hours later. I sat at her pristine Honda Civic with 2 garbage bags of clothes and my backpack, watching our apartment building shrink in the side mirror. Linda kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror, her forehead creased with worry. "Honey, are you sure this is what your mother meant? Maybe she was just having a bad morning." I shifted in the back seat, the plastic bags crinkling. "She meant it. Trust me." The Peterson house sat in a neighborhood I'd only seen from the school bus. Tree-lined streets with sidewalks, houses with attached garages and small front yards. Everything looked intentional, maintained. When we pulled into their driveway, I felt like I was entering a different world. Jake met us at the door, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Dude, this is insane. What kind of mother kicks out their kid on their birthday?" "The kind who's tired of being a mother," I said, trying to sound tougher than I felt. Linda Peterson, who insisted I call her Linda, set me up in their finished basement. It wasn't much, just a fold-out couch and a small space heater, but it was warm and quiet. That first night, lying in the darkness, I listened to the unfamiliar sounds of a functional family. Jake's little sister practicing piano upstairs, his dad laughing at something on TV, Linda calling everyone for dinner at exactly 6 o'clock. "This is temporary," I told myself. "Just until I graduate." but temporary stretched into weeks, then months. The Petersons never made me feel like a burden, though I knew I was one. I got a job at the grocery store, working nights and weekends, contributing what I could for food and utilities. I kept my grades up because Linda made me, driving me to school when Jake couldn't, and checking my homework like I was her own kid. Senior year became a blur of work and school, and trying to figure out what came next. College seemed impossible without financial help from my mother, and trade school required money I didn't have. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote essays about overcoming adversity that made my English teacher cry. Mom never called. Not once. I saw her sometimes driving through town or coming out of the bank. She'd look right through me like I was a stranger, like 18 years of shared meals and bedtime stories and trips to the emergency room when I broke my arm had never happened. "She'll come around," Linda would say when she caught me staring out the window. Mothers always do. But I was learning that Linda's world, where mothers packed lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences and worried about their kids' futures, wasn't the only world that existed. In mine, some mothers counted down the days until they could legally walk away. By Christmas, I'd stopped hoping she'd call. By graduation, I'd stopped thinking about her altogether. I walked across that stage with the Petersons cheering in the audience, and if there was a hole where my mother should have been, I'd learned to step around it. The day after graduation, Linda helped me load my bags into Jake's car. I was moving to Columbus for a job at a manufacturing plant, decent pay, health insurance, a chance to start over in a city where nobody knew my story. "You'll always have a place here," Linda said, hugging me tight. "You know that, right?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The Petersons had saved me, but I knew it was time to save myself. As we drove away, I looked back once at the house that had been my sanctuary. Then I turned forward toward whatever came next and didn't look back again. Columbus hit me like a cold shower in January. The manufacturing plant sat on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling complex of concrete and steel that never slept. I rented a studio apartment in a building that had seen better decades, where the elevator worked half the time and the heat barely worked at all. My neighbors were a mix of college students, young professionals starting out, and people like me, survivors with stories they didn't share. Mrs. Chun across the hall worked 3 jobs and never seemed to sleep. Below me lived Tommy, a veteran who'd come back from Afghanistan with nightmares that kept us both awake some nights. The work was hard but honest. 12-hour shifts on the assembly line, building components for cars I'd never be able to afford. My hands developed calluses, my back ached constantly, but every 2 weeks I got a paycheck with my name on it. For the first time in my life, I was completely responsible for my own survival. I furnished my apartment piece by piece from thrift stores and garage sales. A mattress on the floor, a card table, and 1 chair. A 13-inch TV that got fuzzy reception. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every stick of furniture, every plate and cup, every light bulb. I'd earned it. Loneliness was the hardest part. After work, I'd sit in my chair, eating microwave dinners, and wonder what normal families were doing. The Petersons called every Sunday, and Jake visited when he could, but most nights it was just me and the sound of traffic on the highway. I started taking night classes at the community college, 1 or 2 at a time, whatever I could afford. Business administration seemed practical. Maybe someday I could work my way off the factory floor. The classes were full of people like me, working adults trying to build something better with whatever energy they had left after 8 or 10 or 12 hours of making someone else rich. By my second year in Columbus, I made a few friends. Sarah from my accounting class worked at a call center and had dreams of opening her own bookkeeping business. Miguel from the plant floor was saving money to bring his family up from Mexico. We'd grab cheap beers after class sometimes, talking about our plans like they were real possibilities instead of desperate hopes. "You ever think about calling your mom?" Sarah asked one night as we walked to our cars after a particularly brutal exam. I kicked a rock across the parking lot. What would I say? "Hi, it's the son you threw away. How's life without me?" Maybe she regrets it. Maybe she doesn't. But the truth was I did think about calling. Late at night, when the apartment felt too quiet, or when I passed a mother and son in a grocery store and felt that familiar twist in my chest. I'd even dialed her number once, hanging up before it could ring. 3 years passed this way. Work, school, sleep, repeat. I got promoted to a supervisor position, which came with slightly better pay and a lot more responsibility. I moved to a one-bedroom apartment with actual furniture and a kitchen table big enough for 2 people, though I still ate most meals alone. On my 21st birthday, I bought myself a small cake from the grocery store and ate it while watching a basketball game. No celebration, no party, just another day that happened to mark another year of surviving on my own. The Petersons sent a card with $50 inside and a note that said, "We're proud of the man you've become." I cried reading it, the first tears I'd shed in months. That night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, really looked. I saw my father's jawline, my mother's eyes, but something else too. Something that belonged only to me. Strength, maybe, or just stubbornness. The determination to keep going even when going felt impossible. I was 21 years old, completely alone in the world, and somehow still standing. That had to count for something. By 25, I found my rhythm. The community college classes had led to a degree, which led to a better job at a logistics company downtown. I wore ties now, sat in meetings, had business cards with my name printed in clean black letters. The scared 18-year-old sleeping on the Petersons' couch felt like someone from another lifetime. I moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in German Village, a neighborhood where young professionals walked dogs and grabbed coffee from places that knew their names. My apartment had hardwood floors and windows that actually let in light. I had a dining room table, matching dishes, a couch that didn't fold out into a bed. More importantly, I wasn't alone anymore. I met Jessica at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning in March, both of us reaching for the last blueberry muffin at the same time. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and paint under her fingernails. She taught art in elementary school and spent weekends working on her own paintings. "You can have it," I said, gesturing to the muffin. "Split it?" she suggested, and somehow that led to sharing a table, then sharing lunch, then sharing 7 months of Saturday mornings and Wednesday night dinners and lazy Sunday afternoons in bed. Jessica was the first person I told the whole story to. Not the sanitized version I'd perfected for job interviews or casual conversations, but the real story. The cigarette burns on the kitchen counter, the nights when Mom came home drunk and angry, the morning she told me to leave like she was giving directions to the store. "That's not normal," Jessica said when I finished, her hand warm on my arm. "You know that, right? What she did to you." I'd spent so many years making excuses for my mother, explaining away her choices, that hearing someone else call it what it was felt like breaking a fever. It wasn't normal. It wasn't okay. And it wasn't my fault. Jessica's family welcomed me with the kind of easy warmth I'd only experienced with the Petersons. Her parents lived in a suburb of Cincinnati, in a house with family photos covering every surface and a refrigerator door papered with grandchildren's artwork. They invited me to Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, all the holidays I'd spent working or alone for the past 7 years. "You're part of the family now," her mother said, loading my plate with seconds at our first Thanksgiving together. Family takes care of family. I proposed to Jessica on a cold December evening in Schiller Park, both of us bundled in winter coats, our breath visible in the frigid air. She said yes before I finished asking, and we spent an hour on that frozen bench planning a life together. We were married the following October in her parents' backyard, surrounded by flowers and fairy lights, and people who loved us. Jake was my best man. The Petersons sat in the front row, and Jessica's extended family filled every other chair. As I waited at the makeshift altar watching Jessica walk toward me in her grandmother's dress, I felt something I'd never experienced before, the absolute certainty that I belonged somewhere. The only empty seat was the one I hadn't sent an invitation to fill. "Do you regret not inviting her?" Jessica asked later as we swayed to our first dance. I looked around at all the faces beaming at us, all the people who'd chosen to be part of our story. How can you miss something you never really had? We honeymooned in Gatlinburg, staying in a cabin with a hot tub and a view of the mountains. 4 or 5 days, we were completely disconnected from the world, talking about the future we were going to build together. Jessica wanted kids, at least 2, maybe 3. I never let myself imagine being a father, but lying there with her head on my chest, I could suddenly picture it. Little league games and art projects and bedtime stories. All the things I'd wish for as a kid. I want to be the kind of parent who never makes their child question whether they're wanted. I told her. You will be, she said, and I believed her. We came home to our apartment, full of wedding presents, and started planning. Jessica wanted to buy a house before we had kids, somewhere with a yard and good schools. I wanted to save more money, build up a cushion for the unexpected expenses that seemed to find us anyway. But we were happy. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something instead of just surviving, creating instead of just enduring. And if sometimes I caught myself wondering what my mother would think of the man I'd become, I'd push that thought away and focus on the life in front of me instead. Our first house was a 1940s bungalow in Clintonville, with a front porch that needed painting and a backyard perfect for the kids we were planning. Jessica spent weekends at estate sales, finding vintage furniture she'd refinish in the garage. I learned to fix leaky faucets and patch drywall, skills my father-in-law taught me with patient hands and endless encouragement. Every man should know how to take care of his home, he said, showing me how to replace a garbage disposal. It's not about the money you save, it's about the pride you take in providing for your family. Family. The word still felt foreign in my mouth sometimes, like speaking a language I was still learning. Emma was born on a snowy February morning after 14 hours of labor that left Jessica exhausted and me feeling like I'd witnessed a miracle. She was perfect, tiny fingers that gripped mine with surprising strength, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to my soul. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, I made a promise I'd been preparing for without realizing it. I will never leave you, I whispered against her soft head. Never. Jessica recovered beautifully, settling into motherhood like she'd been born for it. She took a year off from teaching, and our house filled with the sounds I'd never experienced as a child. Lullabies and bath time giggles and the soft shuffle of midnight feedings. I was terrified I'd mess it up somehow, that the absence of a good parental example would make me fail when Emma needed me most. But love, I discovered, was mostly instinct. When she cried, I wanted to fix whatever was wrong. When she smiled, my chest filled with something I could only call joy. When she said Dada for the first time, I called in sick to work just to spend the day with her. 2 years later, we had Michael, easy baby who slept through the night and smiled at everyone. Our house became organized chaos. Toys in every room, finger paintings on the refrigerator, a minivan in the driveway loaded with car seats and diaper bags, and all the equipment required to keep two small humans alive and happy. I got promoted again, this time to regional manager, which meant longer hours, but also meant Jessica could stay home with the kids if she wanted. Money wasn't tight anymore. We could afford family vacations and piano lessons and the kind of Christmas mornings I'd only seen in movies. We're blessed, Jessica would say, usually while picking up scattered Legos or wiping mysterious stains from the coffee table. Blessed, another word that felt strange coming from someone who'd grown up believing good things only happened to other people. The kids grew fast. Emma started kindergarten with a backpack covered in princess stickers and a confidence I'd never possessed at her age. She made friends easily, invited them over for playdates where I helped make snacks and referee disputes over which movie to watch. You're good at this, Jessica observed one afternoon, watching me push both kids on the swings of the neighborhood park. At what? Being a dad. Being present. Present. I thought about all the school events my mother had missed, all the bedtime stories never read, all the conversations that had never happened. Being present was the easiest and hardest thing I'd ever done. Easy because I wanted to be there, hard because I was making it up as I went along. By the time Emma turned 8 and Michael 6, we'd established traditions that felt as solid as the foundation of our house. Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon walks around the neighborhood, bedtime stories every single night. Family movie nights with popcorn and hot chocolate, camping trips to Hocking Hills, birthday parties where both kids invited their entire classes, and our house exploded with noise and laughter. Tell us about when you were little, Daddy, Emma would say sometimes, curled up next to me for our nightly story. I'd tell them sanitized versions, the good parts of my childhood, the few bright memories I could excavate from all that gray. I never mentioned being hungry or scared or alone. Their childhoods will be different, better, full of the security I'd never known. At night, after Jessica fell asleep beside me and the house settled into quiet, I'd sometimes walk down the hallway and look in on Emma and Michael. They slept peacefully, surrounded by stuffed animals and books and all the evidence of being truly loved. Watching them, I felt something I could only call redemption. I was 32 years old, and I'd built something beautiful from nothing. The phone rang on a Thursday evening in November while I was helping Emma with her math homework, and Jessica was giving Michael his bath. I almost didn't answer. The number was local but unfamiliar, probably a telemarketer or political call. Marcus? This is Dr. Sarah Williams from Cleveland Clinic. I'm calling about your mother, Linda Thompson. The pencil slipped from my hand, rolling across the kitchen table and onto the floor. Emma looked up from her worksheet, sensing the shift in the room's energy. I'm sorry, who is this? Your mother was brought to our emergency room this afternoon. She's listed you as her emergency contact. She's had a stroke, Mr. Thompson. A significant one. The kitchen suddenly felt too bright, too loud. Emma's voice asking if I was okay sounded like it was coming from underwater. I walked into the living room, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process words that didn't seem real. I think you have the wrong number. My mother, we don't. Sir, I'm looking at her intake form right here. Linda Marie Thompson, age 54, emergency contact listed as Marcus Thompson with this phone number. Are you not her son? 14 years. 14 years since she told me to pack my bags and figure out my own life. 14 years of silence, of existing in the same city but different worlds, of building a family while pretending I never had one myself. Yes, I heard myself say, I'm her son. We need you to come in as soon as possible. There are decisions that need to be made, and she's unable to make them herself right now. Jessica appeared in the doorway, Michael wrapped in a towel and dripping on the hardwood floor. Her face was full of questions I couldn't answer. I'll be there in 2 hours, I told the doctor, then hung up and stared at my wife and children like I was seeing them for the first time. What's wrong? Jessica asked, setting Michael down and coming to my side. My mother had a stroke. The words felt foreign, like I was talking about a character in a book. I have to go to Cleveland. Jessica's expression shifted through surprise, concern, and something that looked like determination. I'll pack a bag for you. Mom can watch the kids. Jess, I don't know if. She's your mother, Marcus. Whatever happened between you two, she's still your mother. An hour later, I was driving north on I-71 toward a city I'd left behind, toward a woman who'd erased me from her life with the same efficiency she'd once used to remove crayon marks from walls. The highway stretched ahead of me, dark and unfamiliar despite being a route I'd traveled countless times in the opposite direction. Cleveland looked smaller than I remembered, grayer. The hospital sat like a fortress of glass and steel against the November sky, all harsh angles and fluorescent light. Inside, it smelled like disinfectant and fear. Dr. Williams was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes and hands that moved constantly as she talked. Your mother's condition is serious but stable. The stroke affected the left side of her brain, which means she's experiencing paralysis on her right side and significant difficulty with speech. She led me through corridors that all looked the same, past rooms full of people connected to machines, fighting battles I couldn't see. Room 314 had my mother's name on a placard outside the door, and suddenly I was 8 years old again, visiting her in this same hospital after she'd broken her wrist, bringing her flowers I'd picked from the neighbor's yard. The woman in the bed didn't look like the mother I remembered. She was smaller, frielier, her hair completely gray and pulled back in a thin ponytail. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed, monitoring a life that had somehow become my responsibility. Her eyes were open, and when she saw me, they filled with something I couldn't name. Recognition, maybe, or regret. Hi, Mom, I said, and my voice broke on the word I hadn't spoken in 14 years. I spent 3 days in Cleveland, sleeping in a motel room that smelled like cigarettes and making decisions about a woman I barely knew anymore. The doctors explained that recovery from a stroke was unpredictable. She might regain some function, or she might not. What was certain was that she couldn't live alone anymore. Does she have other family? The social worker asked, reviewing discharge options. Siblings, close friends who could help with care? I stared at the forms spread across the small table in the family conference room. I don't know. We haven't. We haven't spoken in 14 years. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Carol with gentle eyes, didn't judge. She'd probably heard worse stories. Well, you're here now. That says something. Was it? I wasn't sure why I'd come, why I'd sat by her bedside for hours while she slept, why I'd found myself smoothing her blanket or adjusting her pillow when the nurses weren't looking. Habit, maybe, or the ghost of the love I'd felt for her when I was too young to know better. On the second day, she was awake when I arrived. Her speech was slurred but understandable, and her left hand moved restlessly against the white hospital blanket. You came, she said, the words thick and slow. The hospital called me. She closed her eyes, and I thought she'd fallen asleep again. Then, I'm sorry. 2 words I'd waited 14 years to hear, and they felt smaller than I'd expected. Not enough to fill the hole she'd left, but something. A start, maybe. Why did you list me as your emergency contact? A tear slipped down her cheek. Only family. I had left. I wanted to tell her that she'd made that choice, that you couldn't throw someone away and then expect them to catch you when you fell. But she looked so broken, so much smaller than the woman who'd once seemed to fill every room with her anger and disappointment. The doctors say you can't live alone anymore. She nodded, her left hand still moving against the blanket. Know that. There are places, facilities, good ones, where they can help you. Don't want strangers. I understood what she was asking without her having to say it. The same woman who'd counted down the days until she could legally abandon me was now hoping I'd be the one to take care of her. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. That night, I called Jessica from the motel room. How is she? My wife asked. Broken. Scared. Old. I lay back on the thin mattress, staring at water stains on the ceiling. She wants to come home with me. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? I want to be 8 years old again, with a mother who packed my lunch and asked about my day and tucked me in at night. I want to rewrite the last 20 years and have the kind of relationship that makes this decision easy. But you can't. No, I can't. So what are you going to do? I thought about Emma and Michael, safe in their beds, never having to question whether they were wanted. I thought about the promises I'd made about being present, about family, taking care of family. I don't know yet. The next morning, I sat with my mother while she ate applesauce from a plastic cup, her left hand shaking with the effort. The right side of her face drooped slightly, giving her a permanently sad expression. Tell me about your life, she said eventually. So I did. I told her about Jessica and the kids, about our house with the front porch and backyard swing set. I told her about my job, about the community college classes, about the life I'd built from the foundation she'd cracked when she sent me away. She listened without interrupting, tears streaming down her face. I was angry, she said when I finished. So angry all the time, at your father, at myself, at you for looking like him. I was just a kid, Mom. I know that now. I wanted her to explain why anger had been more important than love, why pride had mattered more than her son. But she was too fragile now for that conversation, and maybe I was too tired to have it. I can't take you home with me, I said finally. I can't pretend the last 14 years didn't happen. She nodded, closing her eyes. I know, but I can find you a good place. Close by. I can visit. Would you visit? The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. Yeah, I said, surprising myself. I think I would. 6 months after Mom's stroke, I'd settled into a routine I never expected to have. Every other Saturday, I drove to Sunrise Manor, a rehabilitation facility 20 minutes from our house where she was relearning how to walk, how to speak clearly, how to live in a body that no longer obeyed her completely. The visits were awkward at first, stilted conversations about the weather and physical therapy sessions, careful small talk that skirted around the 14-year gap between us. But gradually, something began to shift. Maybe it was watching her struggle to tie her shoes with one functioning hand, or the way she lit up when I brought pictures of Emma and Michael. Maybe it was just time wearing down the sharp edges of old hurt. She never asked about meeting her grandchildren, and I never offered. That felt like a bridge too far, too complicated to explain to kids who'd never known they had another grandmother. But I did tell them about my visits in simple terms they could understand. Your daddy's mommy got sick, Jessica explained one evening when Emma asked why I was gone every other Saturday. So he goes to see her to make sure she's okay. Like when I had strep throat and you brought me soup? Emma asked. Something like that, sweetie. The comparison made my chest tighten. I remembered being sick as a child. Fevers that burned through me while Mom worked double shifts, staying home alone with crackers and warm soda. Too young to understand why other kids' mothers took days off when they were sick. But that was the past. This was now, and now my mother was the one who needed soup. Spring turned to summer, and Mom's progress surprised everyone, including her doctors. She regained most of her speech and enough mobility to walk short distances with a cane. We talked about moving her to an assisted living apartment, somewhere with more independence, but still enough support for her limitations. That's when she asked the question that changed everything. I was helping her water the small plants she kept on the windowsill of her room, a hobby she developed during her recovery, when she said, "Marcus, I need to ask you something." "What's that?" She set down the watering can with her good hand and turned to face me fully, something she only did when she was gathering courage for difficult conversations. "My lease is up next month. The apartment I had before this happened. The landlord wants to sell, and I can't afford the assisted living places we looked at. Not long term." I felt the familiar knot in my stomach that came whenever our conversations ventured into complicated territory. "What are you asking, Mom? I know it's a lot. I know I have no right to ask after everything. But I was wondering." She took a shaky breath. "Could I stay with you? Just temporarily, until I figure something else out?" The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Outside her window, I could see families visiting other residents, grandchildren running around the courtyard while their parents chatted. Normal families with normal histories and normal ways of taking care of each other. "Mom, I know what you're thinking. I know what I did to you was unforgivable. But I'm different now." This, she gestured to her cane, her slightly slurred speech, the humbling reality of her limitations, has changed me. I'm not the angry woman who threw you out. I'm just tired and scared and hoping that maybe you've forgiven me enough to help. I thought about Emma and Michael, about the life Jessica and I had built so carefully, about the security and peace we'd created in our home. Bringing my mother into that space felt like inviting chaos back into a world I'd worked so hard to make stable. I need to talk to Jessica. Of course. I understand if the answer is no. I do. But I had to ask. That night, I sat on our back porch with Jessica, watching fireflies blink in the darkness while the kids played in the living room. The summer air was thick with humidity and the sound of neighbors' air conditioners running. She asked to move in with us, I said without preamble. Jessica set down her iced tea and turned to look at me. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd talk to you." "What do you want to tell her?" It was the same question she'd asked 6 months ago in the hospital, and I still didn't have a clean answer. Part of me wants to say no. The part that remembers what it felt like to be 18 and homeless because my own mother couldn't stand the sight of me. And the other part remembers that she's the only parent I have left. And that maybe this is a chance to show Emma and Michael what it looks like to take care of family, even when it's hard. Jessica reached over and took my hand. "It would change everything, Marcus. Our routine, our space, our privacy. Are you ready for that?" I watched a firefly blink once, twice, then disappear into the darkness. I don't know if anyone's ever ready for something like this. But maybe that's not the point. What is the point? I thought about the promise I'd made to Emma when she was born, about never leaving, about being present. Maybe being present meant more than just showing up for my own children. Maybe it meant showing up for the broken woman who'd given birth to me, even when showing up was the hardest thing I could imagine doing. The point is that this is who I want to be, I said finally. Someone who doesn't abandon people when they need help, even when they've abandoned me. Jessica squeezed my hand. "Then we'll figure it out together." Moving my mother into our house felt like performing surgery on our carefully constructed life. We converted my home office into a bedroom, installing grab bars in the downstairs bathroom and a ramp over the front steps. Emma and Michael watched the preparations with curious eyes, asking questions we tried to answer honestly, but age-appropriately. Grandma Linda is coming to live with us for a while because she needs help, Jessica explained while we rearranged furniture to make room for hospital bed and physical therapy equipment. Is she nice? Michael asked, voicing the question I'd been wondering myself. She's learning to be, I said, which felt like the most honest answer I could give. The day Mom moved in was gray and drizzly, typical October weather that matched my mood. She sat in the passenger seat of my car, her few belongings packed into the same garbage bags I'd once used, and stared at our house like she was trying to memorize it. It's beautiful, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You built something beautiful. Jessica met us at the door with a smile that was only slightly forced, and I loved her even more for the effort. She'd prepared a welcome lunch, soup and sandwiches, simple food that Mom could manage with her limited dexterity. Thank you, Mom said, tears streaming down her face as she looked around our kitchen, at the refrigerator covered with the kids' artwork, at the family photos on the counter. Thank you for letting me come home. Home. The word hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't her home. She'd forfeited that right years ago. This was the home Jessica and I had built, the sanctuary we'd created for our children. But looking at her face, at the desperate gratitude there, I realized that maybe home wasn't about rights or claims. Maybe it was about grace. The first few weeks were harder than I'd expected. Mom tried to help around the house, but her limitations frustrated her, and small tasks that had once been automatic now required planning and patience. She knocked over a glass, trying to set the table, and cried for 20 minutes. She fell in a bathroom one night, and I found her sitting on the floor at 2 a.m., too embarrassed to call for help. I'm just making everything harder, she said, accepting my hand to help her up. You're healing, I replied, and meant it. The kids were curious but cautious around their newly discovered grandmother. Emma, always empathetic, brought Mom her drawings and asked gentle questions about her physical therapy. Michael kept his distance at first, confused by this stranger who looked sad all the time and moved so slowly. But children are remarkably adaptable. Within a month, they'd incorporated Mom into their routines. She became the audience for Emma's after-school performances and Michael's elaborate Lego constructions. When she was having a good day, she helped with homework at the kitchen table, her patience with math problems far exceeding what I remembered from my own childhood. She's different than I expected, Jessica said one evening after Mom had spent an hour reading to the kids before bed. Different than I expected, too. Do you think she's really changed? Or is this just who she was underneath all that anger? I watched Mom through the living room doorway, carefully folding the kids' laundry with her one good hand, her face concentrated and peaceful. Maybe both. Maybe the stroke burned away everything except what was essential. The real test came at Thanksgiving. Jessica's parents were hosting, as they did every year, and we faced the question of whether to bring Mom along. She hadn't asked, hadn't presumed to include herself in plans that had been made before she became part of our lives again. She should come, Emma announced during one of our family discussions. Thanksgiving is for family. But sweetie, Jessica said gently, this might be confusing for great-grandma and grandpa. They don't know Grandma Linda yet. Then they should meet her, Emma said with 8-year-old logic that was hard to argue with. So we brought her. Jessica's parents welcomed Mom with the same warmth they'd once shown me, asking about her recovery and including her in conversations like she'd always been part of the family. Mom was quiet at first, clearly overwhelmed by the chaos of a large family gathering, but gradually relaxed as the day wore on. I found her in the kitchen later, helping Jessica's mother with dishes despite being told repeatedly that guests didn't do dishes. I need to feel useful, she explained when I gently tried to redirect her to the living room. I need to contribute something. Watching her carefully dry glasses with her good hand, I saw something I'd missed before: humility. The proud, angry woman who'd raised me had been replaced by someone who understood that grace was a gift, not a right. That night, After we'd put the kids to bed and Jessica had gone upstairs to read, Mom and I sat in the living room sharing a cup of tea. Today felt like a miracle, she said quietly. What do you mean? Being part of a family again. Being wanted instead of just tolerated. I set down my cup and looked at her, really looked. Her hair was completely white now, pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was softer than I remembered, the hard lines of perpetual anger smoothed away by illness and time and what I was beginning to recognize as genuine remorse. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you remember why you kept me as your emergency contact? After all these years, after everything that happened between us. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, because deep down, underneath all that anger and pride and stupidity, you were still my baby. And I guess I hoped that maybe if something happened to me, you'd grown up to be a better person than I was. Someone who wouldn't abandon me the way I abandoned you. The words hung between us like a bridge finally built across years of silence. I'm trying to be, I said. You are, she replied. You already are. 2 years later, Mom was still with us, and our house had reshaped itself around her presence like water flowing around a stone. She'd regained enough function to help with cooking and light housework, and had developed a special relationship with each of the kids that filled gaps I hadn't even known existed. Emma, now 10, sought Mom out for advice about friends and school, somehow understanding that her grandmother had lived enough life to offer perspective beyond her years. Mom listened with patience I'd never received as a child, offering gentle guidance that helped Emma navigate the complex social dynamics of 4th grade. Michael, 8 now and full of boundless energy, had claimed Mom as his personal audience for magic tricks and knock-knock jokes. She laughed at every performance, no matter how many times she'd seen the same trick, and somehow always had energy for one more story before bedtime. She's good with them, Jessica observed one evening, watching Mom help Michael with a puzzle while Emma practiced piano nearby. Better than she was with me, I said, and for the first time, there was no bitterness in the statement, just acknowledgement of a truth we'd all learned to live with. The biggest change came gradually, in small moments I almost missed. Mom started talking about her future, not as something happening to her, but as something she had agency in shaping. She'd begun volunteering at a local literacy program, helping adults learn to read using the patience and determination her recovery had taught her. I want to get my own place again, she announced one evening over dinner, the words dropping into our routine like a stone into still water. Emma looked up from her spaghetti, alarmed. Why? Don't you like living with us? I love living with you, sweetheart. But your parents gave me something incredible. They gave me time to remember who I wanted to be. And now I think I'm strong enough to be that person on my own. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. Relief, maybe mixed with something that might have been pride. There's a senior apartment complex near the library where I volunteer, Mom continued. It's nice, and I can afford it with my disability benefits. I'd still be close enough to babysit sometimes, if you trust me with that. Jessica and I exchanged glances across the table. Trust. After everything we'd been through, the word still felt fragile, but it was there. We'd like that, Jessica said, and I nodded agreement. The day Mom moved into her new apartment, the kids helped carry boxes while she directed traffic from her wheelchair. She'd graduated from the walker, but still needed help with longer distances. Her new place was small but bright, with a kitchen window that faced east and caught the morning sun. I have something for you, she said after we'd unpacked the last box. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box I recognized from my childhood. What's this? Things I should have given you years ago. Inside were photos, me as a baby, as a toddler, school pictures from kindergarten through high school, report cards she'd saved, drawings I'd made, a Mother's Day card from 2nd grade that said, I love you, Mommy, in crayon letters. You kept these? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I kept everything. Even when I was angry, even when I convinced myself I didn't care, I kept everything. Because you were my son, and that never stopped being true, even when I forgot how to show it. I looked through the photos, seeing myself through her eyes for the first time. Not the burden I'd always assumed I was, but a child she'd loved, even if she'd been too broken to love well. "There's something else," she said, pulling out an envelope with my name written in her careful script. "A letter I wrote you on your 18th birthday, but never sent. I wrote one every year after that, actually. 18 letters telling you about my life, asking about yours, saying all the things I was too proud to say when it mattered." I opened the first letter with shaking hands, reading words written by the woman who'd sent me away, words full of regret and love and desperate hope that I was okay somewhere in the world without her. "You don't have to read them now," she said quickly, "or ever, if you don't want to. But I wanted you to know that not a day passed that I didn't think about you, didn't wonder if you were happy, didn't wish I could take back what I'd done." That night, Jessica and I sat on our porch reading the letters together. 18 years of a mother's love expressed too late, but expressed nonetheless. Some were angry, written during her worst periods. Others were desperate, written during holidays or my birthday when the absence fell sharpest. The most recent ones were different, reflective, accountable, full of the wisdom that comes from losing everything and finding your way back to what matters. "She never stopped loving you," Jessica said, folding the last letter carefully. "She just forgot how." Over the following months, Mom settled into her new life with the same determination she'd brought to physical therapy. She made friends in her building, continued volunteering, and became a regular fixture at our dinner table twice a week. The kids adored their Wednesday visits to her apartment, where she taught Emma to knit and helped Michael build elaborate train sets. More importantly, she became someone I could trust with my children's hearts. She never made promises she couldn't keep, never lost her temper when they were difficult, never forgot that being a grandmother was a privilege she'd almost lost forever. On a warm evening in May, I found myself sitting on Mom's small balcony while the kids played in the courtyard below. We just finished dinner, takeout Chinese food eaten with plastic forks because she was still rebuilding her kitchen supplies. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, taking me back in when you had every right to say no. She looked at me with eyes that had learned the difference between pride and dignity. "Taking you back in? Marcus, you took me in. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, I think." She smiled, and for the first time in my memory, it was completely uncomplicated by anger or regret. "Yeah, I think we did." As the sun set over Columbus, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I watched my children play in the courtyard below, while my mother, the woman who'd once thrown me away and then asked me to catch her when she fell, sat beside me in comfortable silence. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined for our story, but it was better than that. It was real,